Welcome to Classical Chats. I'm Tiffany. As you might notice, it looks different today. It's because I'm currently in a hotel in DC because a few days ago I performed a concert. And I am doing this remote, and it's the last episode of the year. Can you believe this is the last episode of Classical Chats of 2021? And I'm very happy to be ending this year with two editors from Henle Verlag. Hold on. From Henle, these blue books. They are the Urtext publisher. They have great sheet music that I grew up using, and I brought the hard copies with me on this trip. They'll be talking about what they do as music editors, what exactly is the process into making these sheet music that we musicians read pretty much every day. And we're going to talk a little bit about Haydn and Chopin and just learn about their work. And I'm excited. Also, quick note before I start this episode, I'm currently wearing our holiday merch. And if you would like to support our fundraiser, the links will be in the description for you. And I hope that we can make it to the $10,000 goal. All the grants recipients will also be receiving some scores from Henle so that you can get really high quality sheet music as you learn music. Let's meet Annette Oppermann and Norbert Müllemann. So I'm glad we're smiling while we start this. Welcome to Classical Chats. It's great to have you. You're my last guest of the year.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, this is the last episode of the year, and I'm here in DC, and you're in Germany. I'm glad we can make this happen.
Well,
So, welcome.
thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'm
We
excited
are
to
glad
learn.
too.
Yay. Well, we're going to learn a lot from you because we, as musicians, always look at sheet music, but we don't really know the process behind how that sheet music comes to our faces every day. So, let's start from the beginning. How did your journey with classical music begin?
Shall I start? Yes. I think it started classical with singing. I was an enthusiastic singer from childhood and joined the choirs of my church, etc., and only changed to instruments when I came to school because I learned that in the school orchestra instruments are needed. And I started with the guitar, but this was, of course, not a very good instrument for a classical school orchestra. So later on, I changed to violin and cello is now my favorite instrument. I played very much music with the school orchestra. This was my first and very intensive contact with classical music.
Oh, wow, you play so many different instruments. I didn't know.
Not any longer. Right
Oh,
now, I only play cello and I do singing always.
that's great. And you, Norbert?
Yeah, well, I don't play as many instruments as Annette does. I just
Me
play
neither.
I just play piano, and actually, it's actually my dad was a music teacher, and so it was kind of given that all of us, like I have two brothers, we had to learn an instrument, and I wasn't so much into it at the very beginning. I didn't really want to, and this was also because my parents wanted me to learn violin, and I have to admit I didn't like the violin at all. So so actually my grandma, she told me, okay, if you learn an instrument, it should be piano. So I just listened to her, and yeah, and sort of it was the correct choice. It from the very first lesson I got into it, and the piano had a very strong fascination, if you can say so. So I was really, yeah, I think it was the correct choice.
That's cool. Well, we're similar because piano, to me, was also just somehow it feels right. And a few days ago, when I finally got to play on stage again, everything just felt very normal. Like I am there with the piano and it's all good again. So, how did you then come from so many different instruments for Annette and you just from learning the piano, then become a music editor?
This was a
Probably
long
a
way.
long way, right? Yeah. Feel free to summarize.
A short summary. I always wanted to do something with music professionally, but I started as a music in a music shop and sold sheet music and instruments. And that was the place where I learned that there are so many different editions of classical pieces like Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier or Beethoven sonatas, and I got more and more interested in them. And so I wanted to know more about this, and I decided to study musicology and was quite on the point to do exactly these things, looking into the editions, critical editing of music, philology in my yes, studying musicology. And so when writing my PhD in music, I came into contact with Henle. And from the moment was the first time here in the house, I knew that is the place where I want to work. And I started to make the preparations for this. And I went to the Joseph Haydn Institute in Cologne, where the critical edition of Joseph Haydn's works is done. And worked there for a few years, and after that, I came here and joined the editorial department.
Hmm. So it kind of all just naturally happened. You were curious about the sheet music in in the shop, and so
Yeah,
that's how it started. Cool. What
and I
about?
still am.
Ah, that's great. I mean, if you're not anymore, then we won't have the sheet music. So what about you, Norbert?
It's funny because it's kind of similar what Annette said that the first time she came to our offices, she sort of decided to become a music editor at Henle. This was also my experience because for a very long time I didn't know what to do, and I studied piano. I also studied musicology, and I never quite knew if I would like to become a professional performer or more like the scholarly university person. So so after my studies, I was just at a loss. I didn't know what to do, and as a one of my friends, she had connections to the Haydn Institute in Cologne, and this is where I met Annette actually for the first time. And I did an internship at the Haydn Institute for just 6 weeks. And apparently, I didn't do a very bad job, so they recommended me as a proofreader for Henle Verlag. And then I did a lot of proofreading for Henle for, I don't know, 1 or 2 years. And finally, they asked me if I wouldn't like to apply for an internship at Henle Verlag. And so my experience was just like Annette's. I came here, I entered the building, and I felt like, okay, this is what I would like to do because there's a certain spirit here and a certain team spirit, and it just feels right. It just feels right to be here. Yeah.
That's great. So then we have to know, what exactly do you do?
Yes, that is not easy to explain, but let's try.
Like a
Since
typical
editing of
day,
music,
maybe, or like a typical day or
yes,
something, you know?
we have many different parts of the work. One time we do very much reading. We read not only literature about the works we edit, but also, of course, manuscripts and music in all forms: sketches, autographs, copies, early editions. We try to compare them. We make big scores where we put on all the details. I think Norbert has an example which he wanted to show for this. We work on the text to know what are the differences of the many sources we have for one work and try to evaluate them to say, okay, this is a mistake, but this may be an earlier variant and interesting for the reader of an Urtext edition. And from these informations, we try to gather a text which we then edit. And that is the other part of the job, is very much communication. We have to prepare the engraver's copy, and it has to be sent out to the for our typesetter for the music who makes the digitized form of the score, and this has to be checked and proofread by external checkers, and we have to decide what to do with the layout for the pages, etc. This is all done in communication with many other parts of the publishing house, with the typesetter, with the other colleagues of the editorial, etc.
Wow, it's
Yeah,
quite a long process.
It's a very long process,
Very.
and it's divided in, like, there's one part of the day when we really sit at our desks and do very tedious work. And then we also have, this part where we communicate a lot. Like, we also have to find artists who provide fingerings for our editions, and we have to find editors. These are usually specialists from musicology who are specialized on a certain composer. So we have to go to conferences, and we have to be up to date in terms of what's going on in musicology. So it's really a wide variety of things we have to do, and that's also part of the fun. Because it's not just sitting at the desk, it's also communicating and talking to artists, talking to scholars. So it's a huge variety of things we do.
So I'm curious because for some reason, a lot of people think, oh, musicians have to practice and it's so tedious and it's so many hours at the work. But to me, I feel like you also have to spend so many hours at your desk, and you just mentioned that you also have to do some tedious work and probably looking and comparing different notes for hours at the desk. So do you have any particular part of that work you want to tell us? Like, what exactly are you deciding, and how do you decide what is the correct note?
It's very difficult.
I know. That's why I'm so curious.
Yeah, I was wondering if you're actually planning to show the image I
Yeah, we
sent to
will.
you, because you sort of see at first sight what we do. Because like, for example, when we edit a piece by Chopin, the image I sent to you is from the B minor sonata by Chopin. And so what we do is, first we try to find all the sources necessary for the edition. And once we have all the sources collected, we have to compare the sources. And this is being done note by note. So we use like a normal printed edition, and we compare each sign in the edition with the corresponding sign in the source, and we mark if the sign is present or not. So this means staccato dots or dynamic signs or slurs and ties. So we use one color for each source, and we sort of we compare every single sign and every single source. So in the very end, you have a very colorful page which shows.
I was wondering about what the colors were actually.
Yes,
Yeah.
it shows in different colors what the different sources have as readings. And so you see at first sight um, which sources actually form a group, or which sources have common readings. And this is the basis for our decisions, because starting from this comparison, we have to decide which source is actually our primary source and which source is the best source, and where do the other sources derive. And in the editing process, we follow this primary source, but of course, this source also has mistakes. So we have to correct these mistakes on the basis of the other sources. So it's a very tedious decision process also.
It's interesting when you first mentioned that you worked as a proofreader. I think about how for writing, like on Microsoft Word, we have a spell check and it's automatic proofreading. And I was just thinking, this does not exist really in music notation. You have to really depend on the human eye to go note by note. I can't imagine how many hours that takes. Like from one manuscript, from the beginning till the printed edition, how many months is that?
I think we usually we count like an edition takes a year from the
Mm,
point we start until the printed edition is published
wow.
actually. But this is
That,
just the standard. Some editions take years.
yeah, I mean, I think Annette, you worked on the Haydn, such a big choral work. I mean, I can't imagine
Yes,
how many years and hours that took.
it took a little more than 1 year.
Yeah, how did you land on the oratorio? I mean, it's just,
Let's be
yeah,
honest.
so many different parts.
Yes, it is what Norbert described is the comparison of all the sources. It's a so-called collation of the sources. This took, I think, 3 or 4 years. Only the collation, only so that I know what I have to compare and on what I have to decide on. And um, I think, of course, we all do all other things in between. You don't edit one work 8 hours a day, 5 days per week, etc. So you can't. But I think netto, it must be around about 5 years, which I needed for the creation. Yes, and this is, of course, a little different than our Urtext editions because I made it for the complete edition. Joseph Haydn works, which is a musicology edition, and also documents all the different states of the work. So I had also to transcribe the sketches and to evaluate different versions of one area or one recitativo. If you have erasures in the copies, and you can see, oh, there was an earlier version, but he changed it, and how can I learn what was under this erasure or under the neatly stitched leaf, which is on the music. This took very much time. But in the end, it resulted in 3 big volumes, and
You must be so
I
proud at
hope.
the end to see the final product.
Yes, now I am. To be honest, when it was finished and I saw it lying on the desk, it was a kind of strange feeling that this should be my work for 5 years. But now, if I take it into my hands 10 years later, I think, wow, not badly done. And what is what is very nice is that we have these scores from the complete editions. These are very big items, but with Henle, we have these scores also as study editions in a very handy format, and it's nice to think that very many people can buy these study scores, which are not very expensive, and so the knowledge which is documented in the complete edition is spreaded to the musicians very easily.
Yeah, that's good, and all the hard work that you did really can inspire many more people when they read those scores and study.
Yes,
So how did you?
maybe.
Well, yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think so. Um, how did you decide, or did you decide on your specialty in the creation and also in the other choral works that you edit? How did you choose that specialty?
Yeah, no, not really. To be honest, to become a Haydn editor was fate because when I was had finished my PhD in 2000, I was looking for a job in this area of musicology, and there was about through Henle the contact to the Haydn Institute in Cologne, and they accepted me. They had a vacancy, and I started working there, but it was, I think, love of in first sight
Oh,
when I entered the institute and Haydn. I really love the oratorio, and I love to work on it so very long. But then when I came to Hele in 2008 and was becoming the responsible editor for vocal music, that was really for me. Um, Yes, back to the roots because I love singing. I studied also German literature, and this is a very good basis for doing the lead repertoire
hmm.
here. And so this is my was my way to
It all
this.
tied up together from the beginning when you love to
Yeah.
sing too. That's great. So there's a connection and everything's very organic in that way. Are there some things about Haydn that you didn't know before becoming editor for his creation and his big choral work?
Many things. I wasn't a Haydn specialist at
Yeah.
all when I started working on this, so I was really troubled by all this literature and all, yes, this bulk of musicology to have to learn for this editing. But what was, I think, most impressing for me is how we always think when we think about musical sources, okay, there's the autograph and there's maybe one copy and there's the first edition and so on. And what we mostly want is the autograph of, because the composer wrote this down and this is the most valuable source. And with Haydn it is completely different, because of very many works we don't have the autographs anymore. They are lost, and so it is with the creation. But you have hundreds and millions of copies, and how interesting it is to compare these copies and what you can learn from these copies, and how very essential they are for Haydn's popularity in the 19th century. He was very much, his music was spread over the whole world in copies and not in editions. This was something very new for me.
Wow, it's a entirely different process of sharing music because now you just click a few buttons and it's out in the world. But to have so many
Yes, we
copies,
can't imagine
yeah.
today.
Hmm, interesting. So, Norbert, Chopin is your specialty. Is one of your
Yes.
specialties. How did that come
It's
about?
one of, well, again, it's like Annette. It's sort of destiny or fate or what you would like to call it. I didn't really choose it. I mean, I always loved to play Chopin, and of course, as a pianist, Chopin, I think, needs to be one of your favorite composers because he composed so genuinely for the piano. It's something very special. So, but I never thought about editing Chopin. But this, when I came to Henle, actually on one of my first days, my two colleagues, they came to my office, and they had a pile of sources in their hands, and they said, "Okay, this is now the sources for Chopin Prelude, and we would like you to start editing the cycle." And I felt kind of overwhelmed because I knew it's difficult to edit Chopin, and I was just a beginner, a bloody beginner, and I didn't feel capable of doing this. But slowly but surely I got into it, and I developed all these skills and all the knowledge you have to edit this music. And yeah, and in the end I was really very happy. They sort of confronted me with Chopin, and so it just happened.
Just like, here you go, Chopin Prelude.
Yes, and actually the preludes are easy to edit, so it wasn't such a bad start. But later on, I also did other works by Chopin, and they are really heavy stuff to make an Urtext edition of.
It's difficult to edit Chopin. What makes it difficult? Is it the many different sources and the mistakes and differences?
Exactly. It's the abundance of sources, and the problem is the sources are all, not all of them, but you have very many authentic sources. So all of them can be directly or indirectly traced back to Chopin himself. So you have very many authentic readings, and you cannot say one of them is right or the other one is wrong. Somehow all of them are correct, and you have to find a way through the jungle of all these readings, and you have to present the variants so that the pianists know there's not just one urtext you have to play here, but there are different readings you may actually choose from because all of these variants are by Chopin himself in a way.
Yeah. Are there some things you learned about Chopin similar to the question I asked Annette about the composer and these works while you were editing? Because I'm sure you've played some of these pieces before when you were studying
Yes.
piano. So, any different perspectives that you learned?
Actually, what I just said, this knowledge about variance is something I didn't have before. I just thought, there's one urtext and you have to play it and that's it. But for me, it was a revelation to see all these differences, and you see that Chopin sort of always improvised his music. So this is what you see in the sources. One time he wrote down a different ornament, in the next copy he changes it. He finds different readings for his students, and so there's a whole bunch of readings you can choose from. This is something I didn't know before, and this is something I really enjoyed, and which also had a certain effect on my playing and on my performing.
Hmm. And I know you revised the ballades and the preludes. What prompted that revision, and what was that process like? Because you weren't starting from the original abundance of all the sources anymore. You were
No.
correcting something. So what prompted that correction? What was that like?
Yeah, that's a bit difficult to say because there used to be a Henle edition in our catalog, which was a good edition, of course. I mean, when I revised this, it didn't mean the old edition was bad, but the old Henle Chopin editions, they didn't really document or present all these variants. They were kind of one-sided. So for a long time, actually, pianists told us, your Chopin editions are not really up to date anymore. You have to change the principle behind it. So this was why we started doing these Chopin revisions, and we are still doing it. To present the sources in a different way.
So when you play these editions, how do you choose between the variants? Since you're a
Well,
pianist
I
yourself.
think yeah. Well, I'm not really a concert pianist, so
You still play.
so we shouldn't talk about. I do play, but I don't perform anymore. And I think the ideal way would be to have all these things in mind and to choose spontaneously what to play. But of course, I cannot do it. I have to look at the score and I have to try different versions and I have to see, okay, what works best for me. And I think, for me, I would have to make a plan, which reading to choose and how to perform this piece. But I think to come closer to Chopin's way of playing or performing, it would be better to have the things in mind and to choose spontaneously in a sort of improvising way.
Hmm. I never thought of it
This is
like
how it
that.
should work.
That's. See, I knew I was gonna learn something. I never really thought. I mean, I could imagine it happening, but I didn't know that it was a lot of improvisatory um, style in his works. Because I
Yeah.
usually associate that more with maybe Liszt because of all the crazy passages that from one chord and then blah
Mhm.
blah blah blah. That could be improvisatory, but that's interesting.
Actually, it's getting much more closer to Chopin if you start doing it. It's you are allowed to do it. It's not forbidden. The text is not really fixed as much as we think it is.
And what about Annette? Do you have a different way of approaching vocal music? I mean, I don't know if you still sing now, but yeah. So
Yes, I
great.
do.
So then, what is that experience like now, since you have the years of working as an editor and going through the process of seeing these scores printed? Has it changed
Yes,
for you?
I think yes, it has changed really because I think there were 2 points. On the one hand, what Norbert already said, that we learn from reading all the manuscript sources and autographs and editions and seeing so many differences between the sources. We learn that the text is not so firmly constituted as one thinks when he sees a printed edition. The printed edition looks like, okay, this is the way you have to do it, and there is no other thing. And you see kind of behind the text if you are used to the manuscript sources and if you know how this text developed, and that this is not the only way the text could develop. It could have been another way. It could have been shorter or louder or articulated legato instead of staccato and so on. And I think this is something which I have in mind when now singing, for example, from the leader editions I have made, or we have in our edition. And the other thing is that you learn very much about how music is built. So you see the process the composer has to go through to work, to have a work written down and worked out, and you hear it also in this way. After reading music scores 20 years, you see, okay, this is the bass line, these are the strings and they have these functions now. And so, and this makes music making and music hearing so much more fun because you're kind of part of when it
Hmm.
comes to life.
Yeah, I
So
can see
maybe.
that because it's a living thing almost because it can change.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's why
Yes.
I loved having you talk about this process because it's not just an object. Music is not something that's fixed and you just kind of observe from the side. It's something that you are part of, and so for me, playing the music, it means a lot to have the audience to experience with me. So it's kind of part of the present time and space together with the music to bring it alive. So yeah, well, thank you so much. Anything you'd like to add
Thank you.
for musicians who are reading the edition that you would love for them to know or think about? Maybe we can end on this, since many musicians will be watching this episode.
Well, they should read. They should read our critical comments because you
I
always.
did not want to say it.
I know it always looks very boring and it looks very, I don't know, dry and not really attractive. But there's so much in these critical reports because it's again exactly what Annette said. It opens up the whole story behind the work and the whole story behind the printed edition. And when you start reading, you suddenly realize, there are different readings and there's a source which has E instead of C. And why can I just not try if C actually sounds better than E? So it may inspire you to question the text and to try out different solutions. So I think looking at the very back of an Urtext edition is always a good idea.
There you go. I think that works. I mean, it is what.
That was a
Yeah,
wonderful
I think that was
finale.
great because that is what sets the Urtext edition apart, right? Because you have those explanations,
Yeah.
and so that's why I'm happy to have Henle supporting the grants recipients who will be getting some scores to accompany their journey in learning music. So yeah, that was good.
And maybe we can just add one thing because actually when you check the Henle Library app, all these critical commentaries are not just at the back of the edition and not just printed. These comments are in the musical text. When you read the music in the Henle Library app, you see all these highlighted passages in the music, and when you click on these areas, you find the explanation behind it. So it's actually in the score, and this makes it even more exciting to
Mm.
explore the score and the different
Yeah, so you can
readings.
really see the history and how it came to be. So
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
great. Well, I think that was good.
Yes.
Thank you. So, there you go. That is how these sheet music come to be through many, many months and sometimes years of editing note by note. So, I think it just increases your appreciation for the music that's in front of you. And at least it did for me. So, I hope you enjoyed this classical chat. I hope you've enjoyed the past, I don't know how many episodes. I look forward to making more next year. From everyone at Together with Classical, thank you very much for your support and happy holidays.